Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to take a look at the 2026 U.S. Senate race in the state of Texas. On Tuesday, March 3rd, Texas voters voted in the primaries for the midterms. Texas and North Carolina were actually the first two states to kick off their primaries for the midterm cycle this year. And in Texas, for the U.S. Senate race, we have incumbent Senator John Cornyn, a Republican running for re-election. However, he was facing opposition in the Republican primary from Attorney General Ken Paxton and Congressman Wesley Hunt. Now, the last time that an incumbent senator lost their primary was back in 2012 when Republican Senator Richard Lugar lost his primary, and the Republican candidate in that Senate race in Indiana ended up losing the election in the general election to the Democrat. So it's very rare to see an incumbent senator lose in their own party's primary. However, John Cornyn is on the verge of doing so. Now in Texas, what they have is runoff elections in primaries. So that means that if no candidate gets past 50% of the vote, the top two candidates advance to a runoff. Now, John Cornyn's going to finish with about 42% of the vote, Ken Paxton with almost 41%, and Wesley Hunt with about 13%. So Cornyn and Paxton have both advanced to the runoff, which will be held nearly 3 months from now in late May. Now, President Trump has not endorsed a candidate in the runoff. However, he has said that he will make an endorsement very soon, and that whoever he does not endorse, he wants that candidate to drop out. Now, some context here to this primary. John Cornyn he has lost some popularity among the MAGA base for certain votes that he has taken. He's been accused of siding with Democrats too much. Meanwhile, Ken Paxton has been, with the lack of a better term, he's been one of Trump's strongest soldiers as Attorney General of Texas. He's viewed as the more MAGA candidate. Now, Trump has yet to make an endorsement in this race. I do believe that if Trump doesn't make an endorsement, I think Ken Paxton will win. If he endorses Paxton, I believe Paxton will win. If he endorses Cornyn, I think Cornyn likely wins, but that there's a chance that Trump's endorsement still wouldn't even matter and Paxton would still win. The reason being, the Republican Party's base has really soured towards John Cornyn. To be quite frank, if you're an incumbent senator and you're getting less than like 70% of the vote in your own party's primary, that is a glaring warning sign, and it is so for John Cornyn. Now, in my personal opinion, when you compare the two candidates in a general election versus the Democratic nominee, I think John Cornyn would be a stronger candidate. I think he does a better job of appealing to moderates and independents. I think Ken Paxton is a very controversial figure. He will cause Democrats to turn out in droves to vote against him. But regardless of who ultimately wins this runoff, I think the Republicans are favored. But I do think with Ken Paxton, it becomes a pretty competitive race. But with John Cornyn, I wouldn't say it's safe for Republicans, but it's pretty close to safe. Now, on the Democratic side of the primary, we had State Representative James Talarico versus Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Talarico won the primary by about 6 percentage points, and his coalition consisted of white voters, Latino voters, Asian voters, and just young voters in general, whereas Jasmine Crockett's coalition consisted of more older voters and African American voters. And you can see a pretty clear split here. Crockett did fairly well in East Texas. Talarico did better in the western half of the state. He swept the Rio Grande Valley. He did very well in Austin, San Antonio, the Dallas-Fort Worth suburbs, but Crockett did well in DFW itself and in the Houston area and the Houston suburbs. I do believe that Talarico is a stronger candidate than Crockett. Talarico's campaign has been very focused on winning over independents and moderates, while Crockett's strategy for the general election would have been to try and draw out the Democratic turnout. So essentially, what Crockett believed was that if she were to be the Democratic nominee, her path to winning would be to get as many Democrats to turn out as possible while not focusing on independents or Republicans. But Talarico acknowledges that Texas is a red state, and for a Democrat to have any shot, you have to win over a lot of independents and even some Republicans. So I do believe that Talarico, he understands what kind of race the Democrats need to run here, and I think he would be a stronger candidate for the Democrats compared to Jasmine Crockett. Now, even with the Democrats having their best possible nominee in James Talarico, even I do think if John Cornyn wins the Republican runoff, he would win fairly comfortably in November. But with Ken Paxton, it becomes a pretty competitive race. In fact, if we go over here and look at the race to the White House's projections here, if we look at what happens if Talarico runs versus Cornyn, Talarico only has a 23% chance of winning, and Cornyn is projected to win by 5 percentage points. But if you switch to Ken Paxton as the Republican nominee, Talarico's chance of winning shoots up to 47%. Paxton is only projected to win by 0.2 percentage points. So with Paxton would have a slight edge over Talarico, but the race would be pretty close to a coin flip. However, with John Cornyn as the Republican nominee, the Republicans would have a clear advantage, and I think that's something else which reflects this is if you take a look at the 2020 presidential election in Texas, Donald Trump won Texas by 5.5 percentage points, but in the Senate election that year, John Cornyn won by 9.5 percentage points. So John Cornyn did outrun Trump by 4 percentage points. So Cornyn is a fairly strong incumbent. However, if we go back to 2018, we will see that Beto O'Rourke came within 2.5 points of beating Ted Cruz. Now, the national environment here was Democrat plus 8.5. So if the generic ballot is D plus 10 in 2026, for example, which would be a bluer environment than 2018, I do think the Democrats could have a shot at potentially flipping this seat if it is Talarico versus Paxton. And something which you would probably want to note is that in the 2024 Senate race in Texas, Colin Allred only lost to Ted Cruz by 8.5 percentage points, while at the same time Donald Trump carried Texas by 13.5 percentage points. So this shows that if Republicans nominate unpopular nominees for U.S. Senate races, those nominees will tend to underperform, even though they may end up ultimately winning due to the state's partisan lean. So if Kamala Harris had done, if she had performed slightly better than Joe Biden had in 2020, then Colin Allred would be a senator today. Allred outperformed Harris by 5 percentage points. So there are certainly voters that are willing to vote for a Democrat for U.S. Senate, even though they might be voting for a Republican for president. But keep in mind that Trump won't be on the ballot in 2026. It's going to be a midterm year. It is expected to be a blue wave year. That's just how midterms tend to go. The party that's not in the White House tends to do fairly well in midterm elections. And ultimately, I do think that Democrats are in a good position right now. They had their best possible outcome on Tuesday night, which was that Talarico won the Democratic nomination, and the Republican nomination going to a runoff was good because you have what it results in is there's 3 months of constant infighting between the Republicans. Paxton and Cornyn are mudslinging at each other. They're damaging each other, and whoever ultimately comes out as victorious in that runoff, they will be damaged compared to where they were 3 months ago, which helps Talarico as he gets a 3 month advantage to campaign across the state for the general election. And one other thing that I wanted to note here is that if you look at the overall primary vote in the state, Democrats outvoted Republicans by nearly 4 percentage points. 2.3 million voters picked up a Democratic ballot, while 2.114 or 2,140,000 voters picked up a Republican ballot. That means that if this were to be if the primary was head to head between a Democrat and a Republican, the Democrats would have won by nearly 4 percentage points. And that is really significant because the last time the Democrats outvoted Republicans in a primary was all the way back in 2002 in the state of Texas. So this shows that Democratic enthusiasm is through the roof right now. And frankly, if I'm the Republican Party, I would not feel comfortable right now. I'd be at least a little concerned because, just look at these margins. Joe Biden in 2020, he won Harris County by 13 points. In the primary, Democrats won here by 29 points. In Dallas County, huge shift. Tarrant County, Biden only won here by half a percentage point. Democrats won here by 13 points. Travis County, 45 points for Biden, 59 points in 2026. So ultimately, what we are seeing in Texas is a huge reversion back towards the Democratic Party, particularly fueled by Latinos. So I think that Republicans, yes, they are favored to hold this Senate seat, especially if John Cornyn is the nominee. But if you have a perfect storm, a perfect set of conditions for the Democratic Party, I think it is possible that James Talarico could beat Ken Paxton in November, but it would take a lot of things to go right for the Democrats. But so far, those things seem to be going well for Democrats. Now, if I'm a Republican and I want Republicans to hold this seat, I would want Trump to endorse Cornyn. If I'm a Democrat, I want to see Paxton become the Republican nominee. But ultimately, again, I do think this is a red-leaning state at the end of the day. So flipping this state is going to be a very tough lift for Democrats, and it will require a massive blue wave. But based off of what we've been seeing through election results through 2025 and 2026, it is possible. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like, subscribe, turn on that bell icon so that you don't miss any future uploads and you have your notifications on. Please feel free to comment any suggestions, your thoughts, whatever you may have to share, and I will see you all in the next video.